Minister of Orm. This is Philip Zeicher. He is the Minister of Labor. That's Irena von Ruffelaar, Minister of Health and Human Services. Jason Wong, our ATG delegate, and then Laura Crowley, our Home Office Secretary. So I'll hand it off to my capable colleagues to explain the situation a little bit better.
Very quickly, there are two main characteristics of URM that are very important for every strategy that was implemented. First of all, it's the first point of entry for any migrant that comes from Kayapera. And then secondly, it's a developing economy. We are not yet very strong, but last year we experienced the GDP growth. Over the past years, we've experienced the GDP growth of 9%, which is impressive, but we want to keep that up. And very importantly, as I already mentioned, any migrant that eventually reaches Otanya, Durit, or Kampala has to move through URM.
So I'll give a brief overview at the regional level of how policy decisions were made, and then my colleagues will expand further on the country level. So there are two main paradigms in decision making at the ATG group that you mentioned. The first was defining country standards on refugee treatment. And there were three subpoints to this that I want to highlight. One, we thought overall it was very time consuming. Two, it was difficult to enforce. Three, frankly, it was a little unnecessary in our situation. And we'll explain why. The main reason for this, that we felt it was unnecessary, was that every country in our region was, thankfully, very dedicated to human rights and protecting dignity of every migrant. And so we all walked into this negotiation process having the same goals. We came to an agreement almost immediately on what we wanted. Quite frankly, there was very little negotiation. We set very high standards for each other because we all wanted high human development index. So instead, what I think we should have done is focused on inter-country flows and border agreements. So this means multiple things, but in one sentence, we as a collective region should have worked together to alleviate the problem. So, we could have decided together, based on our ability to handle migrants, to distribute the number of migrants, instead of each talking to one another about our borders and about how we should process migrants as well. It was critical that we acted as a community rather than for self-interest or even in segments. And lastly, because of some decisions that we had actually made in this section, mainly because of the Human Development Index concentration, we actually limited our ability to work together on a regional level without violating our own previous agreements. So instead of this happening, we think that we need more of that. So.
Yep, Philip was going to tell you now about our labor strategy.
So the URM domestic strategy consists of 3 points. We think it's of vital importance to invest early in migrant development domestically to ensure that they gain employment. Employment leads to integration, and integration leads to naturalization, which reduces the cost on a shorter term. Second is that paths to naturalization need to be easy and quick. And third is that documentation of migrants is absolutely not optional if you want to correctly allocate funds, design these pathways for them to flow into your country. This shows the favorability. I'm going to ask Laura to explain it.
So actually, we see here that initially, URM had quite a large proportion of Kayaporeans, and so there was actually a reasonably high favorability in the country before the crisis. And there was some here, you see the effect of the sympathy of their neighbors in this crisis, and it goes up, and then it drastically drops. And this is when URM gets this huge influx straight away because it's the first country. But what you see here is we invested early, and as this goes on, this actually continues to rise and it goes back up. So you see the effect of the early investment, and that really, this one drop can seem scary, but actually it can be brought back up.
And that is reflected also in the budget versus cost. So with a huge influx in migrants in the beginning, the cost of housing these migrants, of helping them survive increases drastically. But this early investment causes this cost to plateau early. Migrant flows didn't stop here, but the cost did plateau. Lastly, this is our key point, documentation. All investments domestically tend to be in this area, right? After migrants cross your border. But if this place is not well managed and the correct funds are not allocated here, the people benefiting from the investments here will be a small proportion of the total migrant flow. So this is key to maximizing your domestic investments.
So to conclude, we basically saw that through this whole thing, people were focusing on how do we combat this challenge, this crisis. But in our situation, it actually really wasn't a crisis or a threat to our economy. It resulted in GDP increase, and you've seen this in a lot of other groups' presentations, that actually they were able to use this as an opportunity. And the ways that we did this were actually spending a lot of money really early on. And a lot of this was due to help from our delegation. We got a lot of subsidies and a lot of budget early on, which really paid off. We saw that our cost really plateaued. And yeah. Our other key takeaway was the approach from the ADG delegacy was very like, everyone came to the table with already knowing that we want to protect these migrants. And so everyone focused on that, even though everyone was already in agreement with that, and nobody focused on, okay, we should focus the flows this way, and we should try and use this system to our advantage to get people to where they can best be taken care of. And so we thought there could have been a different approach internationally that would have been more beneficial for everyone. And then, yeah, don't be afraid to invest early, I think, was our key takeaway.
Thank you for listening.
Well, so obviously you're the first country to receive this wave of migrants. And you've shown us two paths of how the international negotiations within the ATG could have gone. One where you ended up and one where you would have liked to end up. Could you tell us a little bit about what arguments you marshaled in trying to get to your ideal solution, and why did it not work out?
So I guess our ideal solution, the reason we couldn't get there is because of that international agreement that you have to make. And to be honest, we came to that more ideal solution of focusing on the flows of migrants rather than how you treat the migrants, because of that experience and knowledge we got from our ATG delegates. Yeah, I think Jason might be able to expand a little more on that one.
Yeah, a few key things that other groups had mentioned. In our reflection, we also found to be critical as well. Like, there was no open data platform where we could see each other's information. The Human Development Index in the real world, the United Nations publishes and everybody can see it. We knew that was a key criteria for different countries that guided their policy development, but we couldn't see it. And to some extent, we also knew every country wanted some migrants to grow their own economies to varying levels. But in some ways, the Human Development Index in this simulation was a key driver of where those migrants flowed. The opaqueness in that section really hindered a lot of collaboration. One specific example was we were the first country. Otania was the last country. They kept coming to the ATG delegation asking for more migrants, and it was difficult to send them that way. Every country actually did try to funnel some migrants towards there, but I think because of the Human Development Index, migrants found countries quite pleasant and decided to stay. So that was a succinct example of why interregional collaboration didn't happen and could have alleviated stresses in every country.
Like, I think we saw that there were two routes mainly to get to this upper country, and that one route would actually be faster than the other. So maybe one country should start to close down their borders, but because we had this focus on standards, we were saying, okay, 10% max. Nobody can go below this, but it actually hindered your ability to construct the flows in the way that would be more effective.
So if you would have had less cooperative countries next to you, would your policies changed and how? Or would you still go with the second option or how would you have?
They
Do we still
certainly.
have time?
Time is up. Do you want to answer in one word?
Yes. They would have changed, but it's hard to tell in a like simulation like this because oftentimes you're kind of driven towards that goal, like especially the HD or HRX index. That was kind of in our own minds already. We wanted to go towards that goal. So yeah, they would have changed. I can't necessarily say how likely that would have been. Also, World 1 obviously had a completely different experience than we did. We had a lot of collaboration, so yeah, certainly they could